Some secrets are worth killing for, others are worth dying for. But when Silas Ward rode into Willowbrook that sweltering August afternoon, he discovered there was a third kind, the kind that could destroy everything he'd spent 23 years building, yet still leave him no choice but to act. The woman on the auction platform wore a faded blue dress that clung to curves. Time had only made more alluring. Auburn hair, streaked with premature silver, caught the harsh sunlight, framing a face that haunted his dreams for over 2 decades. Clara Whitmore, now Clara Bell, stood with her chin raised in defiant pride, even as tears threatened to spill from those emerald eyes he'd once promised to love forever. But this wasn't just any auction, and the man orchestrating it wasn't just any businessman. Nathaniel Cross had been waiting 23 years for this moment, and the smile playing at his scarred lips promised that some debts could never be forgiven. What happens next will shock you. And if you're as intrigued as we think you are, a quick like would mean the world to us as we dive into this tale of love, betrayal, and impossible choices. Silas pulled his stallion to a halt at the edge of the crowd, his heart hammering against his ribs. He'd returned to settle his father's modest estate, 3 days in and out, he told himself. Instead, he found the woman who'd defined every lonely night for the past 2 decades, being sold like livestock. "What am I bid for this fine specimen?" the auctioneer called out, his voice carrying across the dusty square. Strong hands for work, curved hips for bearing children, and look at that bosom, still firm at 38. Clara's face flushed crimson, but her spine remained straight. Even in humiliation, she carried herself with the same quiet dignity that had captured Silas's heart when they were barely more than children. The way her dress pulled taut across her chest with each breath, the graceful curve of her neck as she surveyed the jeering crowd, she was still breathtaking. $1, shouted Tobias Crow, a rough-hewn man whose leering grin revealed missing teeth. Other voices joined in, treating her like prime cattle. But Silas's attention was fixed on the man standing beside the platform, arms crossed, watching the proceedings with cold satisfaction. Nathaniel Cross had aged well, his coal-black hair now silver at the temples, his lean frame clothed in expensive Eastern attire. But those pale blue eyes were exactly as Silas remembered, calculating, ruthless, and completely without mercy. 23 years ago, Cross had been his partner. Together, they'd scraped together enough money to buy their first small herd. Together, they'd dreamed of building an empire. Until Silas discovered that Cross was willing to do anything, steal cattle, intimidate homesteaders, even burn out families who wouldn't sell their land, to achieve those dreams. The night Silas refused to participate in Cross's plan to drive the Whitmore family off their property had been their last as partners. It was also the night before Silas was supposed to marry Clara Whitmore. "Going once for $2, the auctioneer called. Clara's emerald eyes swept the crowd and found his. The recognition hit her like a physical blow. Her lips parted, her hand flew to her throat, and for a moment the composed mask slipped. In her eyes, he saw a flash of hope followed immediately by terror. She knew. Somehow she knew this was a trap. $500. Silas's voice cut through the square like a gunshot. Every head turned toward him, and a ripple of excitement ran through the crowd. $500 was more money than most of these people saw in a year. Cross's head snapped up, and when their eyes met across 23 years of separation, that familiar cold smile spread across his face. Well, Silas Ward, I wondered when you'd make your grand entrance." Silas dismounted slowly, his boots hitting the dirt with deliberate authority. 2 decades of building a cattle empire had taught him how to command respect, and every eye was now fixed on him. He wore fine clothes, a tailored black coat, polished leather boots, a gold watch chain catching the sunlight. But it was the way he carried himself that made men step aside as he approached the platform. The auctioneer called for bids, Silas said, his voice steady but carrying an edge that made smart men think twice. I'm bidding. Clara's chest rose and fell rapidly, the movement drawing his gaze to the way her worn dress pulled across her breasts. Even after all these years, even in these circumstances, the sight of her stirred something primal in him. But there was something else in her expression now. Not relief, but warning. This is touching, Cross said, stepping forward with that predatory grace Silas remembered all too well. The prodigal son returns to save his lost love, but you don't understand the situation, old friend. Enlighten me. Cross's smile widened. Mrs. Bell's deceased husband owed me a considerable sum, along with services. When Samuel Bell tried to back out of our arrangement, well, he shrugged eloquently. Accidents happen. Now his lovely widow must honor those debts. The words hit Silas like a punch to the gut. Clara's husband hadn't died in a gambling accident. He'd been murdered. And the debt story was a lie, designed to trap Clara into whatever scheme Cross was running. How much? Silas asked bluntly. Oh, this isn't about money anymore, Cross replied, his eyes never leaving Silas's face. You see, Samuel Bell had been helping me move certain merchandise through this territory. When he developed a conscience, it left me with a problem. I need someone who knows the local routes, the sheriff's patterns, the people who ask questions, and the people who don't. Clara's face crumpled as the full horror became clear. Her husband had been killed for trying to leave Cross's operation, and now she was expected to take his place. And if Mrs. Bell proves uncooperative in that regard, Cross continued, his gaze sliding over Clara's figure with obvious appreciation. Well, there are other ways for a woman to work off a debt. I run several establishments in the territorial capital. Gentlemen pay well for quality. The implied threat hung in the air like smoke. Silas felt rage building in his chest, but he forced himself to remain calm. He'd learned patience in his years of building his empire, and he'd need every ounce of it. Now. There's a third option, Silas said quietly. I pay whatever Samuel owed, and Mrs. Bell walks away free. Cross laughed, the sound like breaking glass. You still don't understand, do you? This was never about Clara's debt. This was about you. The admission sent ice through Silas's veins. You see, Cross continued, I've been watching your career with great interest. The Triple W Ranch, biggest operation in 3 territories, built from nothing in just 20 years. Quite impressive for a man who walked away from a sure thing. Get to the point. The point, old friend, is that you left me holding the bag 23 years ago. While you went off to play the honorable rancher, I had to adjust my methods to achieve our original goals. That adjustment cost me plenty. Cross began circling them like a wolf, his men positioning themselves strategically around the square. So when I learned you'd inherited Daddy's little plot of land here, and when I discovered that your precious Clara had married into debt problems, well, it seemed like Providence was finally giving me the chance to settle old scores. You orchestrated this, Silas realized. All of it. Samuel Bell was a small-time nobody, until I offered him easy money to let me use his freight business as cover. When he tried to back out, killing him served 2 purposes. It eliminated a problem and gave me leverage over his beautiful widow. Clara's breathing had become rapid and shallow, her hands trembling as the full scope of Cross's manipulation became clear. The way her chest heaved with each breath, the slight sheen of perspiration on her throat, even terrified. She was magnificent. "The auction was bait," Cross continued. "I knew you'd come to settle your father's estate. I knew you'd see her up there and remember what you walked away from. I knew that sentimental fool you've always been would try to play hero. And now? Now you get to choose. Walk away. Keep your fortune and your reputation, and Mrs. Bell comes with me. Or ... Cross's hand moved to rest on his gun. Try to play hero and discover that some debts are paid in blood. Silas looked at Clara, seeing the resignation beginning to creep into her eyes. She was already pulling away from him emotionally, trying to protect him from her fate. For 23 years, he'd regretted leaving her behind. Now he had one. He had chance to make it right. But Cross was offering him an impossible choice. Save Clara and lose everything. His fortune, his reputation, possibly his life. Or preserve what he'd built and watch the woman he'd never stopped loving disappear into a nightmare. "There's something you should know," Silas said quietly, his decision crystallizing. "About how I really built my empire." Cross's eyes narrowed with interest. "You always wondered how I managed to acquire so much land so quickly. How I always seemed to know which properties would become valuable. How I could outbid established ranchers for the best grazing rights." Clara was staring at him now, confusion and growing fear in her expression. "The truth is," Silas continued, "I didn't walk away from our partnership completely clean. I took something with me when I left, something that belonged to both of us." "What are you talking about?" Silas reached into his coat, and Cross's men tensed, but instead of a weapon, he withdrew a leather portfolio. "The maps, Nathaniel. The survey reports showing where the railroad was really going to run. The government contracts showing which land would be needed for military posts. I took them all." Cross's face went white with rage. "Those were worth a fortune." "They were worth my fortune," Silas corrected. "Every acre I bought, every deal I made, it was all based on information that rightfully belonged to both of us. I've been living off our partnership for 23 years. Clara's intake of breath was audible. The man she'd idealized, the successful rancher who'd made something of himself. It was all built on theft. "So here's my offer," Silas said, his voice carrying across the square. "I'll give you what I owe you. Not money, the real debt. Half of everything I own. Half the Triple W Ranch, half my cattle, half my accounts. Your rightful share of the partnership I stole from you." Cross stared at him, calculating. It was a fortune beyond anything he could gain from Clara's forced servitude. "But," Silas continued, "Mrs. Bell goes free. Completely free. No debts, no obligations, no threats. She walks away, and you never come near her again." "And if I refuse?" Silas smiled grimly. "Then I burn those documents right here in the town square, and we both lose everything. Because you see, Nathaniel, those surveys also show where you've been running your illegal operations. The routes you use, the officials you've bribed, the murders you've committed, all documented in federal survey reports." The silence stretched taut as a bowstring. Cross was trapped between greed and survival, and everyone in the square could see it. "Clara," Silas said softly, not taking his eyes off Cross, "when I was 17, I promised you something. Do you remember?" She nodded, tears finally spilling down her cheeks. "I promised I'd never let anyone hurt you. I broke that promise when I left town. I'm not breaking it again." Cross's patience snapped. "You self-righteous bastard. You think you can waltz in here, and I think," Silas interrupted, that you're going to take the deal. Because the alternative is that we all go down together, and Clara gets hurt anyway. This way, you get justice for what I took. I get to keep Clara safe, and she gets to start over, free and clear. The negotiation hung in the air like desert heat. Finally, Cross nodded slowly. Half of everything. Documented and witnessed. Agreed. But I want something else, Cross added, his cold smile returning. I want her to choose. Mrs. Bell gets to decide. Come with me now and keep you rich, or watch you lose everything for her sake. Let's see how much your precious love is really worth. All eyes turned to Clara. She stood on the platform still, the afternoon sun setting her auburn hair ablaze, her figure silhouetted against the darkening sky. In that moment, she looked like something from a painting. Beautiful, tragic, and impossibly brave. I choose, she said, her voice clear and strong, to be free. She stepped down from the platform and walked directly to Silas, taking his hand in hers. I won't let you sacrifice everything for me, but I won't go with him either. If we're going to lose it all, we lose it together. Cross's face twisted with rage, but he was bound by his own words. The crowd watched in fascination as the richest man in 3 territories signed away half his fortune for a woman who'd just chosen love over security. As the sun set over Willowbrook, Silas and Clara walked away from the town square, hand in hand. Behind them lay his empire, diminished but not destroyed. Ahead lay uncertainty, but also possibility. Do you regret it? Clara asked as they reached his horse. Silas lifted her onto the saddle, his hands lingering at her waist, feeling the warmth of her body through the thin fabric. I regret a lot of things, he said. 23 years of wondering what if. 23 years of building something that meant nothing without someone to share it with. But this? Saving you? This is the first thing I've done in 23 years that I'll never regret. She leaned down and kissed him then, soft and sweet and full of promise. When they broke apart, she smiled. The same smile that had captured his heart when they were barely more than children. So, what happens now? She asked. Now we go home, he said, swinging up behind her. We've got a ranch to run. It might be half the size it was this morning, but it's ours. And sometimes, he added, pulling her close against his chest, half of everything is more than enough when you're sharing it with the right person. They rode into the sunset together, leaving behind the auction block, the debts, and the men who'd tried to steal their future. Sometimes love required the ultimate sacrifice. Sometimes the price of redemption was everything you'd worked to build. And sometimes a rich rancher's impossible choice was worth more than all the money in the world. If this story touched your heart the way it touched ours to tell it, we'd be grateful if you'd let us know by hitting that subscribe button and drop a comment letting us know where you're reading from. Because there's something magical about knowing this tale of love and sacrifice is reaching hearts all around the world.